The washing room was dark, with only a tiny light blinking on the dryer. It made soft, clicking sounds as it spun. I could feel his warm breath on my neck as my hands grabbed the edge of the washing machine. The cold metal hurt my hands as his chest pushed against my back. His strong hand held my waist while his other hand moved up under my shirt, like he had wanted to touch me for so long. I could barely breathe. My legs felt weak as he moved closer and slower this time. I had to put both hands on top of the dryer just to keep standing. My shirt was pushed up to my chest. His skin felt so warm against mine. My breath made fog on the black plastic as I bit my lip hard. The hallway was silent, but the tension between us was louder than thunder. I didn't tell him to stop. I couldn't speak at all. When he moved just a little bit, making everything feel worse and better at the same time, I pushed back toward him. This wasn't supposed to happen, but here we were. I never planned any of this, but I stopped making plans long ago. He's my husband's closest friend. They've been buddies since they were young boys. I've been part of their story for 15 years: backyard parties, birthday celebrations, surprise visits that felt normal. He helped us move into this very house. He painted our bedroom upstairs with us. When I was sick with the flu 2 winters back, he brought me hot soup. So how did I end up here? Bent over a washing machine, choking on shame and guilt that I could still taste. I'm 38 years old. I have a home that most people would want. 2 beautiful children and a husband who still gives me a kiss on the cheek every morning. We look perfect from the outside: steady, predictable, and safe. But being safe costs you something when people stop really seeing you, and I became invisible a very long time ago. I didn't mean to notice how Mark would stay late after our parties. I didn't mean to feel butterflies when he helped me bring in groceries or when he leaned close behind me to open the fridge. It wasn't flirting on purpose. It wasn't something we planned. It was years of secret looks that always ended in silence, until that silence grew sharp teeth. That evening started just like any other night, a small party with friends. My husband drank too much wine and went to bed early. Mark stayed to help me clean up the mess. We were laughing together, just having fun with an old song playing on my phone. My hair was pulled up in a messy bun. I still wore the pretty dress I had put on for our guests. Then I turned around to give him a dish towel, but his hand didn't take the towel. Instead, it grabbed my wrist gently. He looked at me like he didn't want to do it but needed to, and I didn't pull away from him. The dryer made a loud beep. Somewhere upstairs, a wooden board creaked under someone's weight. I jumped with fear, and he held my waist with both hands to keep me steady. We froze like statues. He was still inside me, both of us shaking. "I should leave now," I said in a whisper. "I know," he replied softly, but neither of us moved an inch. We had kept our distance for so long that I forgot we were dancing around danger until suddenly we weren't dancing anymore. We had fallen right into it. He left 5 minutes later. I didn't walk him to the door. I sat on the edge of the dryer afterward, my whole body shaking and feeling alive in places that had been numb for months. What would you do if the only person who made you feel real was someone you could never be allowed to miss? Because here's the hardest part: I wasn't shocked that it happened. Deep down inside, I had been waiting for it. And the second hardest part: I don't know if I want it to stop. That night, after I showered and put the clothes back in the washer just so no one would smell his scent on them, I stood in the hallway staring at my bedroom door. My husband was snoring loudly. I was still trembling, and I felt no regret at all. If you've ever lived under the same roof with someone and still felt completely invisible, You already understand how this happens. Please like and subscribe. We won't speak louder, just more truthfully. There's something about daily routines that makes you numb before you even notice it happening. Every morning I wake up at exactly 6:45. I set the coffee maker timer. I cook eggs, sometimes toast, sometimes fresh fruit if we have any. The kids stumble into the kitchen one by one, still sleepy. My husband sits at the table with his phone, barely looking up unless the news is playing. I move around all of them, not really part of the scene, just needed like furniture. I used to feel proud of this daily dance. I thought being the center that kept everything together meant I was important. But slowly, without any warning, it just became background noise. I became part of the walls and floors. That week after the washing room incident, I moved through my days exactly like I always did. Dropping kids at school, buying groceries, changing bed sheets on Thursday. Nobody noticed that anything had changed except for him and me. Mark showed up 2 days later with a spare part to fix the kitchen sink. He didn't call first. He never had to. My husband always said Mark was like family, so I opened the door for him. My hands were still wet and soapy from washing dishes. The morning sun was hitting the counter perfectly, and I couldn't look directly at his face. "Hey there," he said, his voice too quiet and careful. His eyes searched mine like he was waiting for me to slap him or slam the door shut. But I didn't shut anything. I just nodded and said, "The sink is still leaking water." He got down on his knees under the counter, while I stood awkwardly by the kitchen doorway. I should have gone upstairs to give him space, but I stayed there. I wiped the counter that didn't need cleaning, watching how his shoulders moved under his checkered shirt, listening to the familiar sound of his work boots on our tile floor. When he stood back up, he looked straight at me and didn't smile at all. "I've been thinking about you," he said, "more than I should have." I couldn't answer him. The words wouldn't come out. He stepped a little closer, but not too close. "I'm not going to push you," he added quickly. "But if you tell me it was a mistake, I'll believe you and walk away." My throat felt tight and dry. The room felt too hot. The fridge hummed behind me. A dog barked from 2 houses down the street. And all I could think was, "Why didn't it feel wrong?" I whispered back. "I don't know what any of this was." He nodded slowly. "Okay, that should have been the end of everything. He could have left right then. I could have erased him from my thoughts forever." But he didn't leave. He went down to our basement to check the water pipes, just like he always did. Just like he belonged in our house, and that's what scared me the most, how normal it all felt. Mark has always been the helpful one. He's the guy who puts up our Christmas lights every year. The one who takes our trash cans to the curb when my husband forgets. He shows up when there's a leak, a loose stair railing, or a storm that knocks down a tree. He never asks for anything back, never crosses lines, never stays too long except now. Now I notice the way his fingers brush against mine when we pass each other in the hallway. Now I hear the silence between words that we never needed to say before. Now I remember exactly how his hand felt on the back of my neck, firm, warm, and sure of itself, in a room where nobody else even saw me. And the worst part is, I want more of it. I've been married for 16 long years. I met my husband when I was only 22 years old. We had 2 babies before I turned 30. We built this whole life together, one paycheck at a time, one decision at a time, one sacrifice at a time. And somewhere during all of that building, I stopped being touched like I was a woman. I became just logistics and planning. I became meals and schedules and laundry piles. But when Mark looked at me, really looked at me, I felt like I was still here. It's not that I don't love my husband anymore. I do, or I did, Or maybe I still do in the same way you love an old, comfortable sweater, familiar, cozy, but worn thin in all the places that used to matter most. But it had been over a year since my husband and I had even hugged each other without having a specific reason. So when Mark reached for me in that dim room, I didn't feel like I was betraying anyone. I felt chosen and remembered, like someone finally noticed I was more than just a mother and a wife. Like underneath all the patience and routines and silence, I was still someone worth wanting and desiring. I hate how true and real that sounds. The next night, I stood by our kitchen window after everyone had gone to sleep. The house was peaceful except for the dishwasher humming behind me. I stared out into our backyard, watching tree shadows dance in the gentle breeze, and I whispered to myself, "What am I doing?" Because I knew deep down that this wasn't over yet. It started with tiny things that seemed innocent. A text message at 9:17 at night while I was folding clean towels on the living room couch. "You left your hair clip in the washing room." I stared at my phone screen for almost a full minute before typing back, "I know." No smiley face, no joke, just three simple words that felt more naked and exposed than any photo could ever be. 3 days later, I opened our front door to find that little hair clip sitting on the entry table. He hadn't knocked or rung the doorbell. He just walked in the way he always did, casual, expected, safe. Only now nothing felt safe anymore. He barely glanced at me when he walked through to our garage, but his hand touched mine when he handed me a screwdriver to hold, and I felt that simple touch travel all the way down my spine. Mark started visiting our house more often, always with some good reason: a pipe leak, a loose door hinge, a package that got delivered to his place by mistake. He never stayed very long, but in the space between what we said out loud and what we kept silent, something big was changing. The first time things got really risky was on a Tuesday afternoon. My husband was out having lunch with his buddies. Mark came by to fix our back screen door. I brought him a cold glass of lemonade. When I handed him the glass, our fingers touched again. He didn't let go right away. Neither did I. "You look tired," he said softly, with concern in his voice. I just shrugged my shoulders. "I sleep fine." "That's not what I meant," he replied. I felt it then, his eyes on me like warm sunlight under my shirt. I backed up one step and turned toward the kitchen sink. My hands were shaking, and I had no good reason why. We didn't touch again for almost a whole week, but the silence between us got thicker and heavier, blooming with something we couldn't say out loud. I caught myself staring too long when he bent down to pick something up. I started brushing my hair before he came over, just in case. I wore soft, pretty sweaters instead of my old stained t-shirts. It wasn't really about looking beautiful. It was about feeling seen and noticed. He noticed everything. I could feel it in the way he stayed a little longer, the way his voice got deeper when we were alone together. He never said anything inappropriate or wrong, but every single word felt like a test that we were both about to fail. One evening after dinner, I went outside to take the trash to the curb. Mark was already in his driveway, dragging his own trash bin down to the street. "Late night for trash day," he said with a small smile. I nodded back. I forgot it was Thursday. We stood there in the quiet darkness. The smell of fresh grass and warm pavement hung in the summer air. The whole neighborhood was peaceful, with porch lights flickering on one by one. Then he said it very carefully, like he wasn't sure he had the right to speak. "I think about it all the time." I didn't pretend not to know what he meant. I just swallowed hard and whispered back, "Me too." Neither of us moved closer. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I added, my voice shaking with fear. He nodded, stepping just close enough that I could feel the warmth coming from his body. "Then we don't do anything else," he said. but neither of us stepped back or walked away. That night in bed beside my sleeping husband, I kept thinking about Mark's hand gripping that trash bin handle, the tension in his jaw, the pause in his breathing. I couldn't fall asleep at all. The tension got much stronger the next weekend during a group barbecue. All of us together, my husband flipping burgers on the grill, Mark handing me the metal tongs. Our hands brushed again, and this time it was completely on purpose. His thumb gently touched my knuckle as he passed me the utensil. I didn't pull away or flinch. I didn't step back. I held my breath so long that I felt dizzy and lightheaded. I caught him watching me when I bent down to grab a serving dish from the cooler. I caught myself watching the way he leaned in close to laugh at my husband's silly joke. The normal, everyday feeling of it all, with this dangerous risk poolsing just underneath the surface. When I brought out fresh lemonade again, I handed him a glass. He held it longer than necessary. His fingers touched mine for way too long. I saw my husband looking the other direction. I saw a neighbor walking past our yard. I saw the whole house full of people, and none of them knew our secret. It made me feel sick to my stomach, and it made me want it even more. The next day, I found a folded note hidden under our kitchen sink. It was just one sentence written in rushed, messy handwriting. "I'll be in the garage at noon." I didn't write back, but at exactly 1 minute past 12, I opened the door to our garage. He was already there, pretending to fix an old rake. His shirt was damp with sweat. His eyes found mine immediately, and neither of us spoke a word. For 30 long seconds, we just stood there staring at each other. The smell of hot dust and motor oil was thick in the stuffy air. I whispered, "I can't keep doing this anymore." "I know," he replied. "I feel like I'm falling apart." He stepped closer, then said, "Maybe stop pretending that you're not." He didn't touch me first. He waited and watched. We stood in that garage just feet apart with nothing but air and years of holding back between us. The sound of someone's lawn mower buzzed in the distance. My heartbeat pounded so loud in my ears. The heat from the overhead light bulb made the air feel heavy and thick, like a thunderstorm about to break. I stepped closer first. I don't know if it was curiosity, hunger, or just being exhausted from holding back for so long, but I moved toward him. I brushed past him like I needed to reach something on the shelf behind him. I didn't need anything at all. When our shoulders touched, he turned around slowly and carefully. His chest almost grazed mine. I looked up into his eyes and whispered, "If you touch me right now." He didn't ask what I meant by that. He didn't ask for permission or wait for an answer. He just let his hand find the small of my back, very light at first, almost trembling, and then much firmer. My breath caught in my throat. "We shouldn't do this," I said softly, but I didn't move away from him. "I know," he whispered back. His lips found my neck before they found my mouth, leaving a slow, careful trail that made my knees feel weak and wobbly. I reached for the edge of the workbench to steady myself. The cool metal helped ground me for just a moment, but only for a moment. He pressed in closer to me. The first sound I made wasn't a soft moan. It was a sharp gasp, a surprised intake of air, like something had cracked open inside my chest. His hands weren't rough or demanding. They were careful and gentle, testing everything, as if he knew he was handling something already broken. I turned toward him and let my forehead rest against his strong collarbone. We stayed like that for a heartbeat, our bodies touching but completely still. Then he leaned down, and it wasn't a kiss right away, just his warm breath on my cheek. Just heat and closeness. A soft brush of his lips near mine, but not quite touching yet. It was that waiting and wanting that completely unraveled me. Not the actual act, but the moment right before it. The stillness before the fall. When it finally happened, it wasn't gentle and sweet. It wasn't rough either. It was desperate and controlled, but just barely holding on. We didn't speak at all. He lifted me up onto the workbench, not roughly, but with a kind of urgency that scared and thrilled me. My hands gripped the back of his shirt, pulling him even closer to me. The garage smelled like old paint and cedar wood. My shoulder bumped against a wrench hanging on the wall. Something metal fell to the concrete floor with a loud clang. Neither of us looked down to see what it was. His body pressed into mine, and I arched toward him without thinking, not to make the moment deeper, just to feel it completely. There was already a rhythm to it, something unspoken and natural. We had both been holding back for way too long. I reached behind me, trying to steady myself against a board covered with hanging tools. The cold pricks of metal made me flinch slightly. He saw this, paused, and whispered with concern, "Too much, should I stop?" I shook my head firmly, my jaw tight with determination. "Don't you dare stop." His lips found my throat again, and this time when he kissed me, it wasn't hesitant or unsure. It was full and heavy, with years of silence behind it. I should have pulled away. At any point, I could have stopped this, but I didn't want to. I let my legs wrap around his waist. I let my hands pull him even closer. I let the whole moment collapse all over both of us. At one point, a car door slammed shut from 2 houses away. I tensed up with fear. He froze completely, but we didn't stop what we were doing. Afterward, we didn't speak right away. I pulled my shirt back down slowly, adjusting it as if that simple action would erase everything that had just happened. He stepped back, running his hand through his messy hair, his breathing still uneven and ragged. I looked at him, then really looked at him, and whispered, "What did we just do?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again without saying anything. The full weight of it hit me all at once like a truck. The house just 20 feet away from us. My husband inside watching television. A barbecue grill still warm from cooking. A dozen text messages on my phone that I hadn't checked. Everything I was still supposed to be to everyone else. He reached for my hand. I pulled it back quickly. "Don't," I said quietly but firmly. "Please don't." He nodded, his jaw clenched tight with tension. I climbed down from the workbench. My legs felt shaky and weak. Before I left that garage, I looked at him one last time and said the thing I think we were both thinking. "This doesn't get to happen again." But neither of us believed those words. I washed my hands 3 times that night. Not because they were dirty with grease or dust, but because I couldn't shake the feeling of his skin still on mine. My palms felt warm hours after he had touched them, like the imprint of his body was clinging to mine, invisible and unwanted. But still, I didn't want to lose that feeling. Dinner was already halfway finished when I walked back into our kitchen. My husband glanced up from his plate. "You okay?" he asked with his mouth full of food. "Yeah," I said quickly. "Just felt chilly out there." He didn't look twice or ask another question. He never does anymore. And that night, his lack of attention stung in a way I hadn't expected it to. Mark's voice carried in through our patio door. He was laughing with the other guests like absolutely nothing had happened. I forced myself not to look outside, not to scan for signs of guilt in his posture, or check how often he looked to see if I was watching him. But I felt something buzzing inside me, a heat under my skin that wouldn't go away. I couldn't finish the food on my plate. That night, I lay in bed completely wide awake while my husband snored loudly next to me. I counted the ceiling fan rotations, listened to the ice maker dropping cubes, anything to drown out the memory. But it kept coming back in vivid pieces, the smell of dust in that garage, his breath against my throat, the cold metal pressing into my back when he pushed me against the workbench. My thighs ached in a way that reminded me I hadn't imagined any of it. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, no new messages, and then it buzzed with a text. A single word, still shaking, you. I didn't respond or type anything back. I turned the screen face down and stared into the darkness until tears started falling. The next day, I overcompensated for everything. I made breakfast like it was a special holiday. Pancakes, scrambled eggs, fresh fruit cut into perfect pieces. I wore lipstick to the grocery store. I sent my husband text messages with things I hadn't said in weeks. Miss you already. Thinking about tonight. Let's plan a weekend trip somewhere soon. He loved all the attention. He kissed my cheek and said, I really like this version of you. I almost laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because I finally understood how invisible I had been for so long, how invisible I had let myself become without even noticing. The affair didn't make me feel guilty because I was a terrible person. It made me feel guilty because it made me feel seen and alive again. The second time didn't happen for another whole week. We told ourselves it wouldn't happen at all. We told ourselves we were completely done, that it was just a moment of weakness that we could forget. But every moment since then had been a lie to ourselves. It happened in the washing room again. He was dropping off some borrowed tools. I was folding clean towels. The dryer hummed its familiar tune. The lights were dim and soft. And then he looked at me with that look. Really looked at me. And everything came rushing back, the ache, the knowing, the wanting. Do you regret what we did? He whispered, standing in the doorway like he was afraid to come closer. I should have said yes immediately. Instead, I asked him back, do you regret it? He didn't give me an answer. Instead, he stepped inside the small room and closed the door behind him. I didn't try to stop him. This time felt different. Quieter, less frantic and desperate. There was still trembling, yes, but not like before. It wasn't from panic or fear. It was from recognition, like we both knew this wasn't an accident anymore. This was a choice we were making. He reached for my hand as I leaned back against the dryer. I let him take it. He pressed into me slowly and heavily. And this time I didn't hold my breath or try to stay quiet. I exhaled long and low, letting the sound escape. It hurt a little bit, but I didn't want it to stop. He paused, resting his forehead against mine, and said the truth. This isn't a mistake anymore, is it? I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that we were both being foolish, but I didn't say anything at all. After he left through the back door, I folded the rest of those towels. My hands still shook slightly. I checked my phone again and again. Still no messages from him. But every time it buzzed now, even when it was just a bank alert or my sister's name, I felt it deep in my stomach. That fear mixed with excitement. That thrill mixed with terror that this was the moment it would all fall apart and explode. That someone would find out and know our secret. That someone already knew. Every time my phone makes any sound, I think it's the end of everything. But I still check it anyway, hoping it's him. It was my husband's sharp voice that broke the spell we were under. A harsh, clipped tone. Where were you just now? I had only stepped into the hallway for a minute or two. I told myself that's all it was when I thought Mark had come by to borrow an electric drill. I convinced myself that's all we were doing, but we had stood there too long, standing too close to each other, and apparently I didn't hide it well enough. My heart dropped into my stomach. I turned around slowly, forcing a casual smile. Just showing Mark where the phone charger was. It was buried under all the coats in the closet. My husband squinted at me with suspicious eyes. You okay? Why do you look so flushed and red? I forced out a laugh that sounded fake even to me. It's just really warm in that closet. I just need some fresh air. He stared at me longer than usual, the kind of stare that made my scalp itch with nervousness. Then he nodded slowly, turned away, and went back to the living room. But the air in our house had shifted, like something had cracked open wide. A suspicion, a hairline fracture in our normal life, and it didn't close again. That night, I avoided looking at my phone completely, not because I didn't want to see his name pop up, but because I wanted it so badly. When it finally lit up with a message, I let it sit there for 30 long minutes before reading it. He knows. Just 3 words, no punctuation, just that simple and terrifying statement. I don't know how Mark could tell. Maybe something in the way my husband had looked at him with those suspicious eyes. Maybe something in the way I had looked back with guilt written on my face. I pressed delete, cleared our entire chat history, then turned the phone off completely. A few days passed by slowly. Nothing was said out loud, but everything felt different. My husband began staying up later than me at night, sitting in the kitchen longer after dinner, locking his phone when he never used to before. Mark stopped showing up at our house altogether. No tools to borrow, no friendly waves from his yard, no text messages, and the silence was louder than any confrontation could have been. Then on a quiet Saturday morning, my best friend came over to visit, Mark's wife. She was wearing dark sunglasses indoors, which was strange. She said she had a terrible migraine. I offered her hot coffee. She refused politely. She just stood there in my kitchen, staring at the floor tiles like they were going to move or speak to her. And then she said it, the words I was dreading. I think something happened. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. What do you mean exactly? Between Mark and someone else. I don't know who it could be, but I know my husband, and I know something important is broken inside him. She didn't look up at me when she spoke, but she didn't need to. The words hung between us in the air, sticky and heavy like spider webs. She left just a few minutes later. I stood alone in that kitchen for almost an hour after she was gone, just thinking. I wish I could say that was the end of our story, that we stopped meeting, that we saved what could still be saved of our marriages and families, but none of that happened the way it should have. Mark came back exactly 2 weeks later. Late at night, unannounced and uninvited. He waited until our house was completely quiet, until I was folding laundry alone in the back room. He didn't say a word when he walked in, just stepped inside and shut the door behind him. We didn't kiss hello, we didn't smile at each other. We just stood there in the dim light, looking at each other. And then he whispered with pain in his voice, I shouldn't be here right now. I know you shouldn't, I replied. I don't know how to stop this, he said, his voice breaking. I know, I whispered back. Neither do I. It wasn't passion anymore. It wasn't a sudden impulse or moment of weakness. It was something much heavier, messier, and lonelier than that. It was 2 people who should have never touched each other, reaching for each other again anyway. His hands trembled when they slid under the bottom hem of my shirt. I let them stay there. And when he pulled away later, breathless and ashamed, I didn't say anything at all. I didn't ask him to come back to see me, but I didn't tell him not to either. Now I live in a strange place between 2 worlds. Every conversation with my husband feels like a test I might fail. Every text alert makes my heart race. I look at myself in mirrors and wonder when I changed so much and how I didn't see it happening to me. And still, I check the door hopefully when it makes any sound. Still, I think about the way Mark whispered my name like it physically hurt him to say it. Still, I don't know what I really want from any of this. We thought we were being so careful. We believed we were invisible to everyone else. But secrets don't stay buried forever. And I don't know what scares me more, losing him completely or finally being found out by everyone we love.